here to introduce myself. I'm Tim Harris, Executive Director of Real Change. I'd like to thank Peace. I'm a person who falls in love at the drop of a hat, and I fell in love with Peace this morning about 10 minutes ago when she told me that she writes poems on her BlackBerry and sends them to herself. How cool is that? I mean, God. Peace grew up in Seattle and has performed with some of the greats in spoken word, including Gil Scott-Heron. How cool is that? And Saul Williams. And she's a featured poet in Underground Poets Railroad, a national tour and film documentary. And before Peace, we had Amos Miller. I mean, grooving at 7:30 in the morning. That's pretty damn cool, too. Amos taught himself piano at 5 and has been making music ever since. He's produced tracks for nearly all of Seattle's hip-hop and R&B talent, including Peace Kelly, Chocolate, and the Silent Lamb Project. Some people might wonder why Real Change, an organization that most people think of as the homeless newspaper, has thrown itself into an initiative program to rethink Seattle's new jail. Well, let me tell you about that. Since the mid-70s, we've seen homelessness go from a problem that really just affected a few marginal people on the fringes of society to being a structural fact of the economy. It's the more or less permanent revolving door resting place for the bottom 1 or 2% of us. And that's since the mid-70s. It wasn't like that before. It's new. We've created it. Over the same period, we've seen incarceration rates grow 5-fold. Up through the mid-70s, incarceration rates were relatively reasonable. They were stable for 5 or 6 decades. Then the rocket took off. The rates increased 5-fold. It's the war on drugs. It's the war on poor people. It's the war on black people. It's Jim Crow by another name. It's institutional racism. It's slavery. I could go on. We now have 1 in 99 Americans behind bars, 5% of the world's population, and 25% of its prisoners. Meanwhile, inequality has risen to the highest levels we've seen since 1928, and the recent economic meltdown is not going to improve the situation. At bottom, mass homelessness, mass incarceration are about throwing people away. That's the reality. We're throwing people away. We take the losers in this economy, we make them into non-persons, and then we pretend that they don't exist. It's what we do. It's what we've grown used to. I'm fond of quoting a theologian named Walter Brueggemann. He wrote a book called The Prophetic Imagination, and he said, situations of cultural acceptance breed accommodating complacency. Let me say that again. Situations of cultural acceptance breed accommodating complacency. There is an institutional and bureaucratic logic to building a new Seattle jail that's grounded in an easy acceptance of what is, as opposed to what should be. When we accept that 1 in 99 Americans behind bars is normal, and that rising rates of incarceration are inevitable, we are on the slippery slope to being able to accept pretty much anything. Let's make this real. A few weeks ago, we got a call at Real Change from a lawyer who's representing one of our vendors, a guy named Donald Moorhead. I know Donald pretty well. I've known him for about 2 years, and he is a great guy. He's a veteran. He's clean, he's sober, he works, the guy's trying. Donald had been in King County Jail for 2 weeks for the crime of loitering in a drug enforcement area. Donald's homeless. Loitering is what he does. He got a tooth knocked out when the cop grabbed him by the face to try to force his mouth open to look for drugs. He got his head cut when it got slammed against the patrol car. It was a brutal arrest, and he spent 16 days in jail over nothing. They had nothing on him. He refused to cop a plea, and if it wasn't for his lawyer, he could have been in jail for 3 months. Donald wasn't on drugs. He wasn't selling drugs. He wasn't buying drugs. What he was black, poor, and in an area where black, poor people live. People call that standing while black, and it's an arrestable offense. In 2007, according to King County Jail's own website, 36.8% of the average daily jailed population was African American. 3.8% of King County population is African American. That is nearly a 10-fold disproportionality. With stories like Donald's, it's easy to see how that happens. Situations of cultural acceptance breed accommodating complacency. What Initiative 100 says is that we do not accept this casually racist business of throwing away the poor. What Initiative 100 says is that we will not accommodate to your bureaucratic institutional logic that says the way things are the way things have to be. And finally, what Initiative 100 says is we are not complacent.